Hello everybody, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we're going to be making another video talking about a certain deck archetype. It's got a couple different names, but it's more commonly referred to as Slop box because it is just a bunch of random cards thrown together. Doesn't really seem like they would work, but surprisingly they do work a little bit together. It does, it's kind of funny if you look at the deck list. It looks like AI generated, like it just took all the best cards in the game and smashed them together, but it somehow does find a way to work. I took it to two tournaments recently. I took it to a challenge this 2 weekends ago where I ended up going 3-1. I think I ended up 6th. I was tied with a lot of 3-1s, so it was resistant based. And I ended up winning my most recent locals with it, so I wanted to talk about the deck list. I played two different lists with a couple changes, but they worked a little bit differently because of the changes. So we are going to have some slides for you then. So let's get right into it. Alright, so we do have the slides here for you. As I said, how to play the Slop box. Some of the main cards here are on the main screen. We got Lily's Clefairy EX, Mega Kangaskhan, and of course, the new best card that every deck seems to want to run is Meowth EX, letting you get that supporter. Very reminiscent of cards like Tapu Lele GX, which I did not play during the time of that card, but was very good. And a card I did play a lot with, which is Luminion V. When you play it from your hand, get a supporter from your deck. And you can only do this one once per turn. I believe the other ones you could do multiple times in a turn. But this one is a little different like that. It specifically targets cards that have Last Ditch in their ability. So if there's another ability named Last Ditch, you wouldn't be able to activate it after the turn after you've played the Meowth, or during the turn you play Meowth. So that's a little interesting. I wonder if we'll see some design works with that. It's definitely a different way to word these new ability supporter search cards, which, you know, we keep getting them. They're always very good, but they're always, you know, very much a much needed card. So a lot of deck lists are going to be built around having that because it just increases the consistency of the game, especially with Ultra Ball being printed in perpetuity. You know, Ultra Ball for Meowth and then, you know, get a supporter right away and be able to force your game state is very strong. Basics of play. Setting up with less search options in this format in a big basic EX deck is a lot harder. In previous, you know, formats, you had Nest Ball and things that could easily get those searched out. In certain archetypes, even if you've ever heard of, you know, played Miraidon, they had a lot of big basic EXs, but they had a Pokemon that would just search them out. But we're lacking Nest Ball, we're lacking any sort of Pokemon way to search them out. So we have main ways to search Pokemon are Cyrano, which is searches 3 EX and puts them in your hand, which is strong because you can pair that with Meowth, both grabbing a Meowth if you have it on your first turn, or going and getting it with Meowth so you can force Pokemon setup on your bench. Another big thing with this deck is managing your energy, where it goes, what Crispin energies are you grabbing, you know, being able to teal dance effectively, setting up your energy switches. The main purpose of this deck is it's a lot of knowing your matchups, knowing what attackers work in the certain scenarios, because it's a very toolbox deck. And what toolbox deck means is you have options that are not straightforward. If you're playing Dragapult, you're trying to set up your Dragapults, you're trying to draw your Cloaks, you're setting up Dragapult, and you're using Phantom Dive every game. In this deck, you're going to attack with different attackers every time, every matchup, every game, and you're going to try and find the best way to win with those different options. So a big engine is using Teal Dance to attach additional energies onto our board, and then pairing that with Energy Switch to be able to attach 3 energies in one turn using Crispin, because we can get one from hand, one from Crispin, and then we can Energy Switch. So a lot of our attacks are usually 3 energy or less, and we kind of can abuse that by managing what attackers we're going to use, how we're going to use them into a matchup, and what decks require different attacks to hit into them, and the best way is to achieve victory by mapping that out once you realize what your opponent is playing. I do have both of the deck lists that I played. This was the first iteration of the deck, the first time I ever played it. So it is a little rougher. Some of the things that I ended up changing. I say we, it was just me. I ended up changing were some of the supporter counts, because this deck felt a little lopsided on the consistency of it. It was definitely a weird deck to sort of navigate during the challenge. I feel the second list I played was much better, much more able to have similar game plans every time and able to force different game states that were advantageous to me. And I recommend that you just sort of feel it out. Like at the challenge, I ended up submitting my deck list with one Latios EX. And I played a couple of test matches after submitting my deck list, and I prized Latios 2 of 3 times. So I ended up changing my deck list and putting Latios, the second one, back in, and I didn't miss it all day. And the 2 Latioses has felt really good. Missing Latios in this deck is almost an instant loss. So I recommend, just play for consistency in this format. It's really hard to have text in this format because the less amount of the same good cards you play, the way harder it gets. It's really easy to just get caught up and try and play like old formats and try and force weird extra tech cards into your deck. But I suggest you just play the maximum amount of the best cards that you can. And then that leads me to this deck list that I ended up running, where I cut some of the one-of supporters and ended up putting in two more of the Lily's Determination, and I ended up putting in an additional search card to help in Terra Orb. I ended up not using it that much. I used it. It was three games at the locals. I ended up using it, I think, in 1 game, and it wasn't like important. So it's something I would think I would cut now after the recent Prague Regional Championships, where certain decks have done better, where we can tech for those matchups. But this deck felt incredible. All 3 games, I was setting up, flying off the board, like using Kangaskhan to draw a bunch of cards, getting everything set up. Lily's feels really good in this deck. I don't think you need that many though. I think 2 is fine. But being able to go, on your first turn, Lily's Determination, and then Mega Kangaskhan the active to draw, if you can get that set up, you're going into your next turn with like 11, 12 cards, if you get some Teal Dances off. So you're seeing just so much of your deck, and then that's really helpful in this deck, specifically because of how many Pokemon there is. You can just sort of set up your board, and then you kind of win the game in the setup phase, and you can just crisp in again and again. In the matchups we're going to talk about at the end, the 3 games I play at locals, I not talk about the challenge because that is a little farther away, and I didn't write any notes, so my memory isn't as good to remember what happened. But I'm going to talk about the matches I played at locals. And specifically in those matches, in 3 games, I attacked with Wellspring Ogerpon 7 times. So that can tell you sort of what matchups I was running into, and as well as how consistent the deck felt. Because in 1 game alone, I attacked with it 4 times because I just had to keep redoing it in the game state to try and progress to where I wanted to be. So it really does feel really good. I think the deck can be very consistent. The one thing is it is lacking in disruption, but I think most decks lack in disruption, and Unfair Stamp is by far the best, or one of the best ace specs. Hero's Cape is very good too right now, just because of the damage output isn't as high for some decks. But we play a disruption card, and it's our ace spec, and it's an item. So you can, Crispin and Unfair Stamp, or Boss and Crispin in the same, or Boss and Unfair in the same turn, setting up big turns, big swings. Unfair feels really good in this deck, and we're going to be getting a new card eventually, super red card. I think it's something red card. It's just an item card that disrupts your opponent, so that's going to be very good in this deck specifically. So that's something to look out for as well. And then the last slide here, the big things to consider when putting this deck together is, what does the locals meta look like? This can be run in all sorts of different ways. I've already changed my current list to account for Crustle, because that would be something we would lose to. We do have Passimian, but I have actually added an additional card to help defeat Crustle. So it can be moved around. There's all sorts of different attackers that this deck has access to. If it has, a 3 energy attack, you can pretty much play it. You just have to obviously change the ratios of numbers, and of course, if it's psychic or grass or water, it can easily find its way in because you already are playing those things, so you can just play more into them. Changes to the list for consistency, like I said, just play as many of the good cards as you can. In this meta, I know a lot of people complain about the format right now, but I think people are still trying to play like decks like Dragapult, where it's a bunch of text, and it's not just playing, four ofs a lot of cards. Because a lot of other card games, a lot of other players from other card games think that, like you just kind of play four of everything, and everything you can. Playing anything less than four can be pretty detrimental. In Pokemon, the philosophy is very different because of how much access you have to your deck. In most games, you're not really drawing that many cards. There's no deck searching. Tutoring, if you know what that is, in Magic is very, very rare. In Pokemon, we don't have that sort of restriction. So if you play other card games, you can kind of pick up on, okay, this needs to kind of play like the same thing every game. So I'm going to start increasing my numbers to four of. So I've been doing that a lot with my lists. Any list I can increase to maximum amounts, I do that. Of course, abusing weakness and prize trading. A lot of this deck is finding the weakness that your opponent's deck has to you, whether that be Wellspring, where they have a lot of single prizers, so you can take multiple knockouts with that and set up big prize turns. Or if it's big Pokemon like Lucario that are weak to Psychic, and you can take big 3-prize swings while only giving them a 2-prizer. A lot of the time, you're just setting up your best attacker in the situation and taking the strongest knockout while trading into them to best. Like using Passimian to attack, when you can. Just trying to set up, a single prizer to give them, and then swinging back on them with a 2-prizer, and just trying to control the way the prizes are going just to make sure that it stays in your favor. Because you can draw out of disruption relatively well if you manage your bench, which is the last point here. Being able to just access Meowth. I'm playing a very heavy Meowth count. I've seen some lists playing 2. I would never play 1 in this deck. I see some other types of decks playing 1 that can kind of get away with it. I'm on 3 Meowth. I just think it's so strong. If you're going to be getting, judged in the late game or unfair stamped, just being able to go, Ultra Ball, get my Meowth, always have it in deck, it feels incredible. I think that's like the main strength of the deck, is how much you can abuse the consistency of Meowth. And Meowth is just a broken card. I don't think there's any if, ands, or buts about it. Meowth is so unbelievably good, especially in this deck where you can have 8 bench spots, so you can fill up on attackers, get 2 Teal Dances down, have Latias in play, and still have an open spot after you get disrupted to throw down a Meowth. Incredibly good. And one card we didn't really talk about, but very situational, Chien Pao, the one that removes the stadium on play. Really, really niche to kind of, it's really hard to explain how to use that card. It kind of comes from experience, knowing when to limit your opponent's options to your bench. That's kind of a big thing when learning the game. Just learning the basics of Pokemon is being able to understand and have cards in your deck that remove the options to your opponent. Being able to, play into a matchup where they're punching into your Kangaskhan maybe once or twice, and then they aren't able to secure a knockout. You've essentially negated their turns if you just pull it to the bench, play Chien Pao, and remove it from play. So you can sponge attacks and then negate turns that your opponent has taken, and just absolutely ruin the value that they've built over several turns just to continue your advantage. And that's the main strength of Chien Pao, is that you can manipulate the board state in such a complicated way. It's something you sort of, if you ever watch Tord play, he always has these cards in his deck. When Turo was out, he's playing Turo and Penny, and any card to remove a Pokemon from play or control your board in terms of controlling what they have access to. Very, very strong. And if you've played for a little while, maybe you know Collapse Stadium. Collapse Stadium was a big card because it would limit your bench to 4. So some certain decks, you could get rid of Luminion and you could get rid of all these liabilities, or like I said, negate turns that your opponent has taken by removing a Pokemon they've built damage on. So that's sort of the main strength of it. Next, we're going to move on to talking about some of the matchups we played and how we navigated that. So let's get to it. All right, that was the slides for Slop box. We are going to be talking a little bit about the matchups. Round one, I did match into Dragapult, which I feel is a good matchup for me with this deck. I can answer pretty much all their stages of the game. I set up pretty early. We traded into each other. I used Wellspring Mask to take 2 prizes. He then returned the favor by knocking it out with Dragapult, and I did have 10 damage on it from a Badoo. So he was able to take 2 right away, but then I Clefairy'd him right there. He took a turn off to do some setup. I wasn't able to set anything up, so I just took a single prize, and then the next turn he was able to knock me out. It hit me with an unfair stamp. So I was able to recover. I had played 2 Clefairy. That was the thing he did not know. So I was able to set down my second Clefairy, use Crispin, and take the knockout. He did have a pretty low bench, so I did have to bench a couple of extra Pokemon to get the knockout for the 2 times weakness. But it was able to do a 2-2-2 prize trade. And my opponent just, it's a rough matchup. You can sort of stumble their setup by using Wellspring. I was able to knock out a Dracloak with an energy on it with the Wellspring, and he was not playing Neo Upper. So it took a couple turns to get back going, and he's not playing any other ways to get energy except for Crispin. So he did use Crispin against me, but it didn't really end up mattering. Like I said, I just went a 2-2 prize trade into that, and I felt very confident in the matchup. I played exactly how I wanted it to, and the deck just felt great. It's very simple, straightforward. Crispin, get into Wellspring, get an energy switch, hit 2 prizes. I'd get return knocked out, get into a Clefairy, Crispin, take 2 prizes, and then the same thing, get into a Clefairy, Crispin, take 2 prizes. Very simple, very straightforward. Just a lot of draw power, just going through your deck, very easy. And then I sat down for my second opponent, who's another friend that I knew what he was on because we had tested a little bit before the tournament, and I was afraid. I was playing into Ceruledge EX, which I imagine is not a great matchup for me. I ended up losing the die roll he chose first. Ceruledge, he sort of started popping off. He set down Drillbur, which when it is played can put, I think, is it 3 or 4 fighting energies in grave, which helps power up a Ceruledge. And I had the option to either Clefairy on my first turn, or Lily's Determination, on my first turn, and draw a bunch of cards. But what I instead decided to do was I just attached a Grass Energy. I didn't have any other ways to get Pokemon, so had he been able to get out of this, I would have lost. I just attached the Grass Energy to the active Wellspring Mask Ogerpon. I used Boss as his orders to bring up Drillbur, and I had sobbed him. And then it became very apparent very quickly that he did not have an out to sob. So for 3 additional turns, I was just taking setup turns, building an insane bench, setting up a Kangaskhan, setting up Wellspring to attack, and then eventually he overbenched to trying to draw something to out the sob. So he ended up with 1 Ceruledge in play, and no Charcadets. So he had a full bench with just 1 Ceruledge. So eventually, before the Drillbur died, I went and Boss's ordered the Ceruledge and hit it with Torrential Pump for 200, and I placed the 120 on his Fezandipity that he put in play. And I didn't take the knockout to refuse giving him bench space, and then he obviously immediately knocked out the Wellspring. But then I was able to not use my Kangaskhan to knock out his just his Ceruledge, so he only had access to 1 bench spot. So then I was able to set up Wellspring again, and then I Wellspringed 3 times to try just sniping Charcadets to win the game. So I would just refuse to give him additional bench space, and he never got more than 1 Charcadet down. And then I consistently set up Wellspring again, because most of my attaches previous to that were for just attach return, because I was just sitting behind Sob and waiting. And it turns out my opponent didn't play any outs. He, I guess, had Switch in his list at one point, but did not in that moment. So I could have sobbed until the Drillbur was either knocked out or I could have just gone and sobbed a different Pokemon. But I just used an abused Sob, and my opponent then ended up overbenching, which really helped out. I think even if my opponent doesn't overbench, I can still find a way to win by just abusing Sob and getting an insane board to the point where I can just take knockouts. Because it's only 2 coin flips for Kangaskhan, so there's also a chance that I can just get lucky and win via luck. But I ended up not needing that. I ended up just controlling the board state, sobbing my way to a victory. And then in the last round, I paired into a matchup again that I thought was going to be quite bad for me. I paired into Team Rocket's Honchkrow. We were both 2-0, so whoever won we knew, because there's only 8 people at locals, I think. We knew whoever won was going to be the only undefeated. So I paired into Honchkrow, and I thought, well, the only way I can win is by using Wellspring Mask again. And I did just that. I just waited early, doing a lot of setup. I ended up Wellspringing twice in that game, so I think that's the total of 7. I did 4 times against Ceruledge. I did it once in the first match and 2 in the last match. So I just sat behind Wellspring for a while, and I was able to actually set up a full bench Passimian attack because Honchkrow is resistant to fighting. So I needed a full bench Passimian attack to deal enough to do the 130 to Honchkrow and trade it into a single prizer. So I just sort of abused Wellspring to take 2 multiple times. It actually came into a late game state where they used Team Rocket's Archer to shuffle us up. I ended up bricking really bad, but they bricked just as bad because I was able to just set up a Teal Mask, which already had 3 energy on it, and just attack 3 times and win that game. So it came kind of like a slow paced game at the end, because Archer sort of just halted the board to a standstill. But that was essentially it. It was a very fun tournament. The challenge was, like I said, was more intense. I ended up 3-1 there. I don't really remember the matchups as well, so that's why I want to talk about the locals matchups. But I think this deck has some good matchups, and especially, you can play some Mist Energy and stuff. You want to beat Alakazam. That can be very good, and there's a lot of ways to beat the single prize decks that are running around, like Honchkrow. Honchkrow, I felt, should be a bad matchup for me, but my opponent, just getting Wellspring Mask, it's hard to deal with that when I can take multiple prize cards, because most decks just cannot do that under any circumstances. So it felt really, really good. The games felt really good. It felt consistent. I know what my matchups are. I know what my bad matchups are. Even the matchup that I thought was bad, like very, very bad, I thought I auto-lose to Ceruledge. I was able to just get in there, control the game, and find a way out. And I think that's what's part of the toolbox decks, stuff like that. That's kind of what they can do, and that's kind of the power of them. The better player you are, the better the outcome will be. So I thought, it run really great, and I really enjoyed how it went. All right, that is going to be the video then, referring to Slop box in the Pokemon trading card game. I hope you did learn something. If you did, please leave a comment, leave a like, and maybe subscribe. I hope you guys have a very nice day, and enjoy.